Bryce Bacchish asks, if you could take any Walt Disney World restaurant and bring it to your hometown, which would it be and why? I think that's an easy answer, Bryce, and I would be honored to have Sunny Eclipse in my hometown. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you guys send me all sorts of Disney questions about the movies and the parks and the history, and I try to give you answers to the best of my ability. I have a bunch of great questions lined up this week. In fact, I have a ton of questions, so much that I'm going to be doing 2 of these back to back. So you're going to be getting another Q&A next week. But before we get started, I want to pick the 2 answers that I like the most from the last Q&A. The question of the week in the last episode was, if you were to make a Lion King ride, what would it be like? How would it be designed? The first answer that I really liked comes from Duck Orca, who says, my Lion King ride is like Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin, where you shoot the wildebeest trampling Simba's dad. You manage to hold him off for long enough, but he always dies, so children are forever scarred. Pun intended. The second answer that I really like came from MC Pro 413 Gaming, who says, what if they redid Kilimanjaro Safari to fit Lion King? You're on this tour through Africa, but you see Pride Rock and many other areas from the movie, such as the canyon that Mufasa died in. At the same time, you have Timon narrating it. It also, at the same time, would still let facts be presented, but from an animal's perspective. And I really like that answer because I'm not the biggest fan of Kilimanjaro Safari, just because it's a little boring. It's like a standard, like almost something you'd see at a zoo. So I think this is a really interesting way to twist it. So I'm also going to throw out a question of the week in this episode, which you can answer in the comments below, and I'll pick out my favorite there. Obviously not going to be doing one next week because I'm recording these back to back, so I kind of can't. Anyway, let's jump right into the questions. Our first question comes from All Things Disney, who asks, what do you think of Disney Mix? Now, if you haven't heard about it, Disney put out an app called Disney Mix. It is essentially a social networking messaging app. It's aimed towards younger audiences, primarily children. And it is essentially, it's just a messenger app. It's got Disney emojis and animations, and it's got these cool little features where you play little games. Kat and I downloaded it and we tested it out the other week. It's really cool in concept. I like the idea of putting out a messaging platform for children that is meant to be really safe. Definitely focused on kids, though. I can't stress that enough. Like, we played around with it and it was cool, but it is also something that we would never probably use on a day-to-day basis because you could just do that sort of stuff like with your regular phone. But it's free to use. So, I mean, if you have an iPhone, I'm not sure if it's out on Android. I'm sure it probably is. Check it out. You can play around with it. It's got some cool ideas to it. Some stuff that I wish we'd see in actual text messaging. For instance, they have these sort of asynchronous games that you can play through text that I thought was really fun. And just stuff like that. So, I mean, I think it's a cool idea. I kind of hope Disney puts more of a focus on their gaming initiative when it comes to mobile, especially because part of the reason they're stepping down from console games and like sort of AAA titles is so that they can focus on casual stuff. And I mean, stuff like this is cool, but you know, we're not getting a ton in the game department. We got Magic Kingdoms, we've got the Emoji Blitz, and that's really about it. So hopefully we see more coming from that. Our next question comes from Sam Castaneda, and Sam asks, my sister and I have a big age gap. I'm about 10 years older, and I was wondering if you had any tips on balancing between rides for her and me. This is a really great question, one that I've been trying to think about, what the best way to go about, dealing with that issue is. My sister's younger than me, but it's only a 4-year age gap. On top of that, she was much more of a thrill seeker than I, so usually it was the other way around where she was upset she couldn't go on some thrill rides, and eventually she would, and I didn't want to. But in general, I think it depends highly on what these ages are. I know you mentioned a 10-year gap, but I don't know what 10 years. Are you 20 and she's 10? Is it a teenage thing? I'm assuming because you're asking the question, she's younger and she can't go on some of the more, crazy rides like, Rock and Roller Coaster, Tower, stuff like that. But I think a lot of details matter, like who are you going with? Are you going with your family? In that case, I would say a good strategy you can think of is, typically if you have younger children going to the parks, they might want to go to bed earlier. They get tired a little bit earlier. So, it might be good to save all of the thrill rides for the end of the day. So then maybe some of you, like one parent and the younger sibling, can go back to the hotel room, maybe relax at the pool a bit while you go take care of the thrill rides that they might not be able to ride. On top of that, I think it's just a matter of playing it by ear and playing it fast. focus your Fast Pass Pluses on the thrill rides. That way the wait is minimized. That way they can go off and do something else really quickly while you go run onto that ride. So you don't have a situation where they're just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, but at the same time that you don't have to split up for too long. You get to sort of just hop on, get it ridden, and then go rejoin the group and go on other rides. So, I think those are the ways to go about it. Mostly just play it by ear and take those opportunities when you see them, when you see, a thrill ride with a low wait time, or just plan your day around it and see if, one of the parents could take them back and, find something for them to do in the evening that'll free you up to go ride some of the more thrilling rides. I mean, I think anything that just doesn't involve having somebody sit there and wait while you're waiting in line, for 45 minutes for Tower of Terror is the way to go about it. Our next question comes from Sarah DeCusian, and Sarah asks, "The Wizarding World of Harry Potter is an amazing place I want to visit. However, choosing between Universal and Disney would be difficult. If Disney had a book fandom-based land like the Wizarding World, I would choose Disney. So my question is, what book/fandom would you like to see in the parks?" Now, I think this is an interesting question because it's not necessarily saying what IP would you like to see in the parks. I can think of plenty of movies, but you're thinking more about, these book series that I think a lot of younger adults you're seeing pop up with, like the Hunger Games and stuff like that. Ooh, the Hunger Games. There'd be a series, just a real life Hunger Games where you get 20 kids and you put them in, and then only one can walk out, and then all the parents can go off and ride rides while they're in there just fighting each other. No, probably not that. That would probably result in a lot of lawsuits for Disney. It's interesting because I feel like my style of what I've read over time has changed. So I don't know if the books I read are necessarily the kind of books that would be eligible for a fandom. Obviously, Harry Potter sort of out of the picture. I guess if I had to pick one, it would be sort of going back to, I feel like this is a classic that a lot of kids read in school. That was one of my favorites when I was younger, which is Ender's Game. And I feel like with Star Wars Land, it might seem like there's a little bit of, fighting over turf there because they're very similar in certain respects. But I don't know, maybe if you found a way to get Ender's Game into the, future world and Epcot maybe. Obviously, there was a movie based on Ender's Game. I don't think it did very well. I remember watching it, and I don't think it was very good. But I don't know. That was a book to me. And I know that's part of like a long series, although I never read the other ones. So, I don't know how that would work. I don't even know what rides you'd put in there. But I don't know. When I think back to the book fandoms that I thought of when I was a kid, besides Harry Potter, there was like Ender's Game. So I think that would probably be the one I pick. Our next question is about some recent news, and it comes from Creator for Parks. And Creator for Parks asks, "Recently, the Walt Disney Company announced that Disney's Main Street Electrical Parade is going back to Disneyland and leaving Walt Disney World along with Paint the Night, leaving Disneyland. What nighttime parade would you like to see in Walt Disney World, and what do you think about the changes?" So if you haven't heard the news, Disney has announced that Main Street Electrical Parade is heading to Disneyland. It's going to stop running in, I think, early October 9th, I think. And at the same time, Disneyland has announced that, their 50th anniversary celebration's wrapping up, and so Paint the Night's going to be going away. It's going to return for the holidays, but beyond that, who knows? And so there's a lot of questions going on as to like what's going to happen with all these parades. I'm holding out hope that we're going to see Paint the Night come to Disney World. Now, a lot of people are saying that's not the case. People have reported from like employees that they're saying no. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that it wouldn't happen anytime soon. Like they mentioned, Paint the Night's going to be returning to Disneyland over the holidays. So what it seems like from what everybody's putting together is Paint the Night's going to end in September. Then there are going to be some holiday parades. Then Paint the Night's going to return during the holidays. Early January, you're going to get the Main Street Electrical Parade. Meanwhile, in Disney World, we're going to lose the Main Street Electrical Parade in October. There's supposed to be holiday parades on a more regular basis through the fall and winter. And then in January, that's something we really don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. My hope is after the holiday sprint of Paint the Night in Disneyland, they ship it over to Disney World and we sort of trade places. I think it's a real bum deal for Disneyland because I'm not a fan of the Main Street Electrical Parade anymore. It is super old. This is a parade that started in the early 70s, so basically when Walt Disney World opened. It's just really old. It was time for it to go, and Paint the Night was probably the best parade I've ever seen. Not just Disney, but just best parade ever. So, you know, I would be really happy if we get Paint the Night in Disney World. I'll feel bad for everyone in Disneyland because they're getting a pretty old, parade that needs to get retired. But that's what I'm hoping for, and I guess we'll have to wait and see what the news is when they announce it further on in the year. And our final question this week comes from FCP Arcer Tap X, who asks, I've heard rumors that Disney Quest in Disney Springs is going to be closed down and replaced. Is this true? If so, what are your thoughts, and what would you like to see replace Disney Quest? Yeah, it is true. It's funny, I had to look this up because I thought it was gone already, but they had announced, I believe it was earlier this year, that they are going to be closing Disney Quest. They are going to be replacing it with this sort of MBA experience store. It's going to be like a store interactive space. I haven't read too much into the details because, to be completely honest with you, I don't really care about basketball that much. But from everything I've heard, it sounds like it's sort of Disney trying to compete a little bit with Universal, which had a similar experience. Who knows when the NBA thing's going to open up? I would love to have seen something different. I was not a big fan of Disney Quest, even when it was still pretty new. I went on a trip way back when I was younger, and it just didn't really wow me. It didn't have that Disney feel to it. It felt something similar to sort of an up-class Discovery Zone or something, or a Chuck E. Cheese. It felt like a fancy arcade, and I get the idea that it was supposed to be a little bit more interactive indoors, but it just was missing that Disney charm about it. For what I would put there, I mean, Disney Springs has got more of a shopping center feel to it. So, there's plenty of shopping already. I don't think it needs more, so I wouldn't turn it into a mall or anything. I don't think there's necessarily one store that deserves it. An idea that I had in the past that I think would be fantastic for that spot, and it's not going to happen, unfortunately, I don't think it would ever happen, is I think that would be a great location for a museum about Disney World, about Walt himself, about Disneyland. There's enough space there to take something like Walt One Man's Dream and make it amazing and make it something that's itself a whole attraction worth going to. I think, that history deserves the respect and the space and the time, but, from a practical standpoint, it's probably wouldn't be an exciting enough attraction, so I don't think it would ever happen. However, that's certainly what I want. Anyway, I want to thank you all for the great questions. Your question of the week this week, I'm going to go with... Let's go with the first question. What restaurant would you want to bring into your hometown? And more importantly, why? I'll pick the best two answers, not in the next episode, but in the episode after that, and I will share them with you all. I want to thank you all for watching. If you want more Disney videos, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button. If you have a question that you would like to ask for the show, all you have to do is leave it in the comments below, or you can let me know on Twitter. I'm @RobPlays. Have a great week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it, and hope to see you next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody. You're on a trip, you're ready to go home, but you don't want to. You start thinking about what would it take to stay an extra day, or 2 days, or a week, or a month. And before you know it, you're wondering what would it take to just live at Disney World because you love it so much and you don't want to leave.